you choose, listen, you choose that life and you're choosing to kidnap gangsters for cash, for ransom. You got to pray nobody's going to see you. And obviously somebody saw. And then the torture and all that other stuff. And what about you? I wanted to ask you, were you worried about being kidnapped?
I'm walking redemption.
Hey everyone, welcome to another sit down with Michael Franzese. Hope everybody is doing well. All is very good, very blessed on this end. As always, I give God all the praise, honor, glory, and thanksgiving for that. I want to thank all the people in Pittsburgh. Last Friday evening, I did a fundraiser for a Christian school. It was wonderful. I love going back east. The people were terrific. Went to Philadelphia for a few minutes, met a few friends there, and just really had a great time. So thank you very much, all of the people in Pittsburgh that I met that night. Couple of quick announcements before we get into today's topic. I want to thank all the people in Chicago that have been emailing me and messaging me about Franzese Wine in Mariano's. We have now in Mariano's a number of stores, I think 97 of them, and people have been really enjoying it. And we're going to be in all the Ralph stores here in Southern California, Safe Mart. We're really starting to spread across the country, and we've been doing a lot of direct-to-consumer, franzesewine.com if you want to buy directly. But I just love all the feedback, and my associates. We have so many of you out there that are enjoying the wine and really telling everybody about it. We appreciate it very much. So to all of you, salute. Thank you very much. Enjoy Franzese wine. It's good. That's how Malbec. Very, very good. And then lastly, the tour in the United Kingdom. We begin on the 12th of May. I'll be heading out there, and we're going to be doing 10 cities, I believe, and we end up in Dublin, part of Ireland, Dublin, Ireland. I know people get upset when I say it's part of the UK. Dublin, I understand, is in Ireland, so please, don't get upset with me if I say that by mistake, but looking very much forward to it. We had a great time in 2022. And we're going to have even a better time this year in 2024. So thank all of you for everything, and we always appreciate all of your support. Today, I have a very interesting guest with I would say a sad story starting out, and really a blessed story as it is today. And his name is Joseph McBratney. For those of you that may not be familiar with all the mob history, his father, James McBratney, was killed in Staten Island way back in the 70s, and John Gotti was charged with that murder. He actually took a plea. I believe he got 4 years, did 3 years at the time, and John was not alone. He was with two other people. He was with Quack Quack, everybody knows who he is, Ruggiero, and another fellow by the name of Galleone. And I wasn't there at the scene, obviously. You hear things afterwards. I'm pretty certain that I can say this with pretty good knowledge that John Gotti did not pull the trigger that night. And actually, they were there for a different purpose that night. At the time, there was a lot of kidnappings going on, believe it or not. There was a group of people, a group of guys, I would say, that were kidnapping made guys and holding them for ransom and actually getting paid before they released. It was going on. And there was a couple of guys involved, one that I knew personally. Unfortunately, he was away with my father in prison, and then when he got home, he got pretty close with me. And unfortunately, the word was out that anybody that was involved in those kidnappings had to go. And I believe they did get everybody. And this was among all 5 families. But unfortunately, James McBratney was caught up in that. The reason they gave that he was killed was because they said that he was Carlo Gambino's nephew. And Carlo Gambino, through Neil Della Croce, gave the contract to John Gotti. That's the way it allegedly went down. As it turns out, McBratney did not kidnap Carlo Gambino's nephew. He did not. He was killed for a different reason by somebody that owed him money. But we're not going to get into all of that now. I don't like to get into things that have been done over and over and over and over again. You can Google it, you can read about it, but that's kind of the bottom line. And Joseph McBratney, my guest today, he was 10 years old when this happened. So how he dealt with it, in the aftermath of that, losing your father, that's somebody he looked up to and was very close to at the age of 10, very, very difficult. And the journey that he's gone through up until where he is today is an interesting story, and he's going to shed some light on that. So we'll get into that now. And, I hope you can relate in some ways to this story, and you'll see that how you can come out of adversity and actually, go through a lot of struggles and challenges, but then come out on the right side and actually be a benefit not only to yourself and your family, but to society also. And I want to make this very, very clear, and I'll tell this to Joseph. Unfortunately in that life, when you're given an order, you got to do it. And if you don't do it, you suffer consequences on your own. And I'm sure whatever John was involved in, and again, I'm not there, I'm not laying any blame on anybody, I just know the life. It was nothing personal, it was business, as they say, unfortunate business. I'm not justifying it. Us guys, myself included, that were in that life, I guess we didn't have to get involved in that life, or we could have, refused the order and maybe had consequences, but it's not something that you would do. You were given an order, you did it. So, and again, I'm not trying to justify anything, so please, I know I get hit up on when people misconstrue something that I'm saying. I'm just trying to tell you the circumstances around things like this happening at some point. And I'll say the same to Joseph. Look, I know the Gotti family. They're wonderful people. They should never be held accountable, even my family, for any things that we did on the street. And I feel that way because unfortunately families suffer over the actions of, guys like us at the time. But anyway, let's get into it. He's an interesting guy and a guy that I have a lot of respect for. So here we go, Joe McBratney. So Joe, I've been looking forward to this. Obviously, I know the history of what happened way back when. That was during my era in that life, so I was very familiar with what I had heard and what the talk was, and obviously what the end result was for people that I knew very well. But we'll talk about that. Obviously, my viewers would be interested in that. But I really want to go back to when all this happened with you. The way I understand, you were 10 years old. And from what I know about you, you were pretty close with your dad at that point. And, how does a 10-year-old react to something like this? I mean, how did you deal with it, Joe?
I don't really know how you deal with it, but I realized that it changed my life forever. That moment when my father was gone, it changed my life for a moment, forever. He was a big, enormous guy, tough guy. I looked up to him. I was afraid of him. But I loved him. A 10-year-old kid, how does he react? And I'm going to tell you, I have an 11-year-old daughter now. My boys are older, they're in their 30s, but I have an 11-year-old daughter. When I look at her and I go, that's how old I was. How did I make it this far? I got thrown out of school, suspended for fighting, acting out, conduct. I would get hundreds in the class and a U in conduct. That's how I reacted to it.
Well, let me ask you, prior to that happening, I mean, did you feel any kind of emotional change? Were you angry and bitter? And did that come out in you? Because you said, the trouble that you had after that. Do you think it was a result of that?
Yes, I think it was definitely a result. The way I acted and the way I did things was definitely a result of me losing my father and growing up with him and being around and knowing he was gone forever. He was the first person the first funeral I ever went to in my life. The first dead body I ever saw was my father. And from there, every other one I walked in, I got in my head, I have the pictures of seeing him laying dead in the coffin.
Yeah, well, you know what? I don't know how you ever get over that. I mean, I've witnessed, people that were close to me, and it was difficult, and I was at an older age. I don't know how difficult it's got to be to lose your father at that age, and then move forward. And how did your mom break it to you? I mean, was she just? How do you tell somebody that a 10-year-old?
The night he was killed, I remember we woke up, my brother woke me up, and everybody was in the living room except for my mother. My grandmother, my father's mother and father were in the living room, and my brother said something happened, and I was like, well, what could have happened? What could have happened? And then my mother came in, and I heard my grandmother say, the boys are up, and she came in the room, and she said, your father was killed. My sister, she used different words because my sister was only 8 at that time. So I remember her saying to my sister, Daddy's in heaven. I can see that scene in my head, photographic memory. I can see my mother coming in and telling me those words, and it changed my life from that day on.
Yeah, do you wonder, how do you process that? You know, the reason I'm asking you, I know there's people out there that taken losses at an early age, and I've spoken to some of them, and it's so hard to process something like that. Somebody that you loved and is with you one minute and gone the next. I mean, we deal with that in life, but to deal with it at a 10-year-old, as a 10-year-old, is very difficult, I'm sure. You know, listen, I know your dad was a figure kind of bigger than life. I heard about him, obviously. Well, you know, I heard he was a tough guy. You know, I was pretty close with Jimmy Coonan at one time from the Westies, and I knew some of those guys by reputation. I don't think your dad was part of the Westies. I think he was kind of his own man. I don't think he was part of them, but he had a reputation on the street, and I heard he was a pretty tough guy.
Yes, he was a tough guy. He was a tough guy. Everybody respected him. Everybody respected him, but I think most people feared him. You know, I remember he came home with a black eye, and whoa, Dad, what happened to you? And I walked into the door. Don't ask questions. I used to watch him how he got dressed with the suit and put the gun in and all that other stuff, and I couldn't wait to be like him. And next thing I knew, he was gone.
You know, when you get back to the circumstances of that, you know, I remember it well. Like I said, that was during my era, and obviously, you know, that the story with Gotti, which we'll get into a little bit. But I will tell you this, you know, at the time, you know, I know there was mistaken that they said your dad, you know, was part of the kidnapping of Carlo Gambino's nephew. And we found out later, obviously, that wasn't the truth. But I will tell you this, there was word out on the street at that time that there was a group of guys that were kidnapping made guys. Now, I kind of knew this personally because one of them was away with my father and happened to be a good guy, nice guy. And then word came out later that he was part of this kidnapping crew. And it wasn't only, you know, it was Italian guys involved in this too. There was a bunch of guys that were doing it. And the word was out across all families, you know, that all of these guys got to go, every single one of them. And I think that's what happened with your dad. He was mistakenly, you know, attributed to be part of that crew, and he really wasn't. Is that what you know?
He was part of kidnappings, but not the Gambino kidnapping.
Exactly.
And Ray, I don't know if you know, Ray Taylor was the detective who arrested Gotti for the murder.
Heard his name, yeah.
But he kept me out of prison. He kept me from going the other way. We would never be having this conversation if Ray Taylor didn't take me under his wing. But he told me your father didn't kill anybody. He said your father kidnapped these three guys, that there's some guys who saw the license plate. They gave somebody else the license plate after that one kidnapping of the JR in Staten Island. And that's how they traced it back, and that's how they found them all out. And they found out they were kidnapping guys and getting money. So,
yeah. And so your dad, you know, even though it wasn't, it had nothing to do with Carlo Gambino's nephew, because he was part of that, you know, kidnapping ring, the word was out that everybody in that had to go. And I remember that. So it was sad. But getting to the specific incident with Gotti, I know, listen, it's my belief, and from everything I heard, it wasn't Gotti that pulled the trigger that night. He was given the order. It was his hit, and he set it up. But he didn't pull the trigger. The guy that Galleone did it.
right, Frank the Wop.
Yes.
Frank the Wop Galleone, who was murdered a few weeks later after that happened.
Yeah, and so Gotti, you know, it was a big deal for him. I mean, he hired, as you probably know, he got Roy Cohn at that time, and Roy was able to make a pretty good deal for him, sweetheart deal on a manslaughter conviction on that. He took a plea and only got, I think he served 3 years on that.
That's it. That was even more bothersome to me.
Yeah, I understand, Joseph, and I hope you understand where I'm coming from. You know, and please, I'm not trying to, I'm out of that life 30 years, and I look back and I got a lot of regrets for things that went on during my time in that life. And I'm not making an excuse, I'm just telling you the mentality of us at that time. You know, if somebody's given an order, you got to carry it out. It wasn't personal, I think, on anybody's part. I don't think it was personal on Gotti's part. It was a big deal for him because what I understood later, that's what got him made. It was that, you know, unfortunately, that hit on your dad that got him made. But, you know, you're given an order in that light, you got to do it, or otherwise you pay the consequence. So, and again, not justifying it, but, and I don't know, I'm sure this doesn't make you feel any better, but, you know, that's how it was back then, unfortunately.
Well, listen, my father knew there was a contract out on him. He knew. And I met a guy who saw him come out of one bar before he went to Snoopy's, where he was ultimately murdered. He was on his way there, and the guy said, "Your father told me that there's a contract out on him." And I told him, "Why don't you leave? Why don't you just get out of New York for a little while?" And he said, "What am I going to do? I leave my kids to get them involved?" And he said, "That's the last time I saw your father. But, there's other things that he knew." And he had a submachine gun in the trunk of his car the night he was killed. Because his word was, "I'm going to kill them all." And I know he had a gun on him. I know he had a gun on him that night. And I know he reached for it. And that's why they killed him. Because they were really supposed to kidnap him and get him to give him information, bring him back to Brooklyn or something, and torture him. Because, that in those days, that's what they did.
And that's what I heard, because it really was a mission to find out who all of these kidnappers were. They really wanted to know them all, and I believe one by one they got them all, as far as I know.
I'm going to tell you that I did a lot of investigation on it, on what happened, and these guys. My father was in prison with Alphonse Persico. I wrote a letter to Carmine, and we had some correspondence back and forth. And he told me Ray Taylor told me that my father protected Carmine in prison in Greenhaven. And Carmine wrote me back and said, "I never did state time. All my time I did was federal. It was my brother Alphonse who was in Greenhaven in the 70s."
That's right, I was Alley Boy, yeah, it was.
Alley Boy, my father was protecting him in prison. Alley Boy offered him a job to come collect money in Brooklyn. And instead, he chose to go with Tommy Genovese and the Miano brothers and kidnap gangsters.
Well, Tommy was the one that did time with my father and came out, and I got very friendly with Tommy. I really loved him. He had, I was very sad to hear what happened with him later on. But yeah, it was an unfortunate decision. I can say that.
I remember I met Tommy. I remember meeting Tommy and his kids. I felt bad for his kids too.
Yeah, yeah, it was a sad situation.
You got the whole crew. They got them all. You choose that life, and you're choosing to kidnap gangsters for cash, for ransom. You're not saying, "I can't wait to retire." You got to pray nobody's going to see you. And obviously, somebody saw. And then the torture and all that other stuff. And what about you? I wanted to ask you, were you worried about being kidnapped?
No, I never, I was just coming up at that time in the mid 70s, early and mid 70s. I didn't worry about that. And I didn't even think of it. We just heard about stuff going on. But, actually, there was a time when somebody should be careful because, you're Sonny Franzese's son, and, there's a lot of money there, people believe. But I never really worried about it, Joe. Honestly, I didn't think about it at that time. But, again, sad situation. But that's one of the horrors of that life. You get involved, that, you make a mistake, and you could pay for it very severely, obviously. Let me ask you this: when Gotti got convicted and got sentenced to life, how did that make you feel?
I don't know if you saw, but I was in the newspaper because I remember going to the Advance, the Staten Island Advance. I told them, "I don't want to see a picture of my father laying dead on the floor. I know you're going to write an article about Gotti being convicted. I'm giving you pictures of my father when he was alive. I want you to put these in." And the reporter said, "Can I interview you?" And I just said that now my father could rest in peace and my family can rest in peace, because every time they mention Gotti's name, what'd they say? Involved. I'm the son. I was never Joseph McBratney. I was always Joe McBratney, the son of James McBratney, who was killed by John Gotti. It was never, I'm still not Joe McBratney, the interventionist, the actor, the game show host, the game show contestant. I'm the son of James McBratney, who was killed by John Gotti. And I don't want to be that. But that's what we are. That's the title that came with me.
I know, every movie about John, everything, they always mention that, always mention your father, every single time. It never fails.
Right, because it's part of the legacy. My father's in Wikipedia, and that's the story, the reason why he's in there.
So John gets convicted, he gets 100 years, a life sentence, same thing. How did that make you feel? Was it like retribution? Did you get satisfaction out of that?
I did feel much better that I wouldn't have to deal with hearing about him anymore and that he was going to pay for what he did. Listen, I believe everybody has a God and his name's not me. Whatever God had in store for him is God's plan, not mine. So even when I met somebody who said, you have to forgive him, I couldn't believe that they were telling me I had to forgive him until I understood that I was forgiving him for me, not for him. Because resentment was like drinking poison, hoping somebody else dies. And the truth is, I was drinking the poison, hoping that something happened to him instead of going on with my life. It was the brakes were on because I had resentment because he murdered my father. And Mike, I didn't know he murdered my father till I was 21. My family kept me away from every newspaper. Didn't know who was convicted. The detective never told me. I mean, I told him what I knew about my father, who he met, who he went with. But that detective came to me. That detective came to me and he said, listen to me. I retired, but your name came up. He said, you're on the list and they're going to come and lock you up. And I told them I was going to talk to you. They came to me because they know I know you. You better get out of New York right now. I'm telling you, or you're going to jail with all your friends. I sold everything I had, got on a bus, Greyhound. I took a Greyhound 3,000 miles to Ferndale, California, which is near Eureka. But after I left, everybody got locked up. So the truth is that moment, and I was there for a little while. I didn't mix in good with California because I would that at that time. You remember the 80s? It was, are you looking at me? What are you looking at? It was as simple as that to fight somebody. You're looking at me.
Different mentality out here.
My cousin would be like, why are you so violent? I go, he's looking at me. You saw the way he's looking at me.
No, I know. Well, out here, let me tell you something. In the 80s, there was no respect out here. I'll never forget, just a quick story. I'm with my brother-in-law. We're in a car, and we pulled into one of these shopping centers. And two yuppies in another car, beeping the horn at it, beeping the horn, beeping the horn. So I rolled down the window and I said, what's your problem? And they go, what the F are you? And they start cursing me out. I said, what? Out of nowhere. We got out of the car. You do that in New York, you're ready to fight or get killed or something, right? People out here were very, very disrespectful back then. But, changed a little bit now. But I know what you mean. Different time.
It was a different time, different place. It's like two different planets.
But you were running the streets then for a while, huh?
Yeah.
Well, you know what? You're smart to listen to that detective. That's for sure. That agent, whatever he was at that time.
Listen, I also was not stupid when they said to me, "We're gonna go do this thing. We're gonna go do this thing, and it's a guarantee we're not gonna get caught." And I go, "Well, that's great for you, but I'm gonna stay here and I'll wait for you."
Yeah.
And when they never came back, I knew the guarantee was not on. There was no guarantee. But my grandparents, I had Italian grandparents, McBratney, but I'm half Danino.
Your mom is Italian.
Yes.
Yeah.
So my grandparents, when my father was murdered, my grandparents took us in and really raised us up. My grandfather was a mechanic, 5'10", with big mechanic hands, with the built-in dirt, built-in grease in the fingertip. He right hooked me one day. I'll tell you what. Yeah, he hit me with the big hands. And I didn't want to disrespect them. I didn't want to hurt them. So I really never stepped over that line that was waiting there for me to step over. You know the line I'm talking about.
Well, let me ask you something. You said something very interesting. Somebody came to you and said you had to forgive John Gotti. Are you a person of faith? You a Christian?
Yes, I'm as spiritual as they come. Listen, God is the only reason why I'm here talking to you. I've had so many God moments in my life. I was in a car accident that I was dead at the scene of the accident, and a doctor driving by in a tuxedo. It was right near a church. The doctor was driving to the wedding at the church that it was near, jumps out, climbs in a broken window, and was breathing for me until the ambulance came. That if he didn't step in that car, I would have never made it. They gave me last rites on the scene. The bishop who gave me my last rites, I came out of the hospital. I went to him and I said, "Bishop, I'm the guy who was in the car accident." He goes, "Oh my God, look at this is the guy." They all had the Italian accent way back when. This is the guy that we did pray for. Look at him. So I believe in that. I believe in all the prayers, and I believe my grandmother, I used to drive her to church in the morning, Mike. So when I drove her to church, I would let her out. She'd say, I'll be back in an hour. And I would say, make sure you say a prayer for me. She'd be like, who do you think I pray for?
Our grandmother said, thank God for the women praying for us all the time. Neither one of us would be here if it wasn't for that, that's for sure. But you know what, Joe, you said something that I think people really need to hear, and that is, forgiveness. When you forgive somebody, it's such a burden lifted off of your shoulders, and I think a lot of people don't understand that. Sometimes they see forgiveness as weakness, but it's not that. I'm in a similar, not the same situation, but to be able to forgive people that were close to me, that I felt just didn't do the right thing or whatever. But it's a burden lifted off your shoulders, and that's tremendous forgiveness to forgive somebody that took your father's life.
Well, Mike, I'm going to tell you that when I heard he was dying, I requested a visit. I wrote a letter to the warden where he was and requested a visit with him because I wanted him to be able to cleanse his soul and maybe make right with God with me. Tell me the truth. Tell me why he did it. Tell me the real reason why, or whatever. But I didn't request it to be angry with him. I went there so he could cleanse his soul and so it would help me.
Yeah.
The warden, he wrote me a letter. I still have the letter he wrote me that he couldn't grant it because I'm not immediate family. But he understood the reason I needed closure for Gotti and to visit him. But I wanted to do it for me. I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to visit him for me. And everybody was like, "Are you crazy? You requested a visit with him. What are you going to do when you go see him?" I said, "I'm going to forgive him.
Wow.
He's going to meet his maker. I got nothing to do with that." But the truth is, it freed my heart. It opened my heart because I had a brick wall around my heart for a long time. Because when you lose somebody so close, you never want to let anybody that close again, so you can feel that hurt again. So it was hard for me. It was hard.
Well, that's something else. I didn't know that, Joe, but that's a real a moving thing on your part to do something like that. And I will tell you, I know the Gotti family. I know John's wife Victoria, wonderful woman. And unfortunately, listen, when John died, he was a big presence in the house, and he's got children too, and it's tough on everybody. This life is so tough on the families, because like I said, they're nice people. They really are, and I know there's so much talk now with social media. There's so much, every other word from people is Gotti this and Gotti that, and that's painful for the family too. A lot of them don't want to hear that. They want to put it to rest, and it's a sad situation. It really is. But I think they would really appreciate hearing what you just said. I mean, that's really great on your part. I have to say that, really. And now that now that he's gone, I mean, you don't harbor any ill feelings whatsoever. Then that's all been cleansed and wiped free.
Yes, because I don't want to wake up. I go to sleep with my eyes closed, and I wake up and greet the day every day, celebrate the day. I have a good life. I enjoy myself, and I never really thought that I would make it this far. I mean, I don't know about you, but I didn't plan on living this long. And I would do my best to try to get out, but nobody would pull the trigger.
And now let's talk about that. You've accomplished a lot in your life. I understand you're doing some wonderful things, or you have done and continue to do with young people, with kids. Is that a big part of what you do now?
I've done interventions for 23 years now on kids from the age of 13 to 85. And I say that kids from 13 to 85 because, I mean, she's very smart. She's a good girl, but she don't know the word no. And I tell her, when Daddy says no, I don't need to say it 100 times. And then she said, "Well, why are you yelling at me?" I go, you think that's me yelling at you? Do you really want to hear me yell? I said, "I don't want to ever yell at you." Even my son, I remember my son, I told him, I said, "If you do that again, I'm going to spank you." And he said, "I'll call the police." And I said, okay, here's my phone. Call 911 and tell them to send the ambulance. And he's like, why don't you tell them to send the ambulance? I said, because if I'm going in handcuffs, you're going in the ambulance. And he never texted me again. I never had to do what I said I would do. I remember I would count 1, 2. I never got to 3. They would be crying before I got to 3.
Well, I understand, totally. I have 7 kids. My youngest daughter, if I raise my voice, she said, Dad, you're not in the mafia anymore. I said, I mean, I can't reprimand you. I can't discipline you. I can't advise you or teach you. These different era today. When we were kids, the parents did what they had to do, and we're better for it. We're better for it.
You saw that wooden spoon or that ladle coming, you knew shit was going, or that belt, you knew shit was going down right there.
Joe, in my house it was different. I think if I have any kind of smartness at all, that came from my dad. Any toughness, that came from my mother. My mother she would not spare the rod. She was a tough woman, man. But hey, listen, when you look back, you appreciate it. We didn't love them any less. We knew it was tough love. And, we're better off as a result of that. But that's great what you're doing. So do you do this intervention where in prisons, or where do you go?
All over the country. I fly all over. People from referrals, they've heard about me. They know they've tried everything to get their kids or their family member off drugs or alcohol. And they say, I heard you're the guy, I got a call. And they call me the junkyard dog of interventions. Because when I go in, I don't come in with options. Either you're going in the front seat listening to your music, or you're going in the trunk. I'll let you out when we get to the airport. Because their kids are dying today, Mike.
Yeah, no. We got such a tough situation, Joe, all this, I had a bad incident with my daughter's soon-to-be fiance who took an Adderall that was laced with fentanyl, didn't know it, and in my house, Joe, in the bathroom of my home, dropped on the floor. Within 10 minutes, he was dead. 24-year-old, wonderful kid. It was so traumatic and such a disaster, But how do we, we got to protect these. We got so much of this garbage coming over the border now. We got 100,000, people a year dying from fentanyl and from opioid overdose. The only way to resolve this, obviously closing that border down, is educate these kids early on. They got to know the evils and the dangers that are out there. And
Mike, I've spoken at schools. No, it's amazing how I've tried to affect how bad it's getting, the pandemic. It's pandemic. But everything they're doing, they know they could die from it. And I said, no drug addict wants to die. They just don't care if they live or die. Yeah. Look at Prince. Prince was taking a pill that he thought was what he wanted, and it was laced with fentanyl, and he overdosed and died alone in his elevator. Michael Jackson, the doctor overdosed him. All these kids today don't understand that it's deadly, the choices they make. It's one little bit, one pinhead of that fentanyl kills you. And it was hard for me, Michael. Listen, it was hard for me because when I put a kid in rehab and they get out and they're doing so good, and next thing I hear they overdosed and died, they tried to do drugs again. And I called this guy up and I said, that's it, I'm done. I'm tired of this. I get more people calling me, they overdosed and died. I don't want to feel that way anymore. I'm trying to save their life harder than they are. And the guy said, Joe, this is war. You have to save the ones who could be saved, and you have to walk over the bodies. The ones that you can't, you got to walk over them. And I'm telling you, for 23 years, I've been doing it. I have a lot of great success stories, Mike. A lot of people made it and they have a great life. They hate me because I made them get off of what they loved more than their mother. I had guns pulled on me, stabbed, baseball bat, punched, threatened, police called, threatened me with, you know who I know. I'm going to call somebody and I'm going to get you. You know who I'm with? Yeah. I said, I did gangsters' kids. I remember I did an old-time gangster. I did intervention on his son. It wasn't working. In 5 minutes, it wasn't working. He said, see, I told you this, mother. I'm taking him out. I brought you into this world. I'm taking you out. I was like, you're not helping my intervention here.
He expected 5 minutes. It would be all.
I said, some are 14 hours. 14 hours it takes me. That's the longest one it took me to make them go. But I told him, one kid I told him, he said, what happens if I don't go? I said, well, my bag is in your room. I'm going to sleep in your bed with you. We're going to shower together. I'm going to brush my teeth with your toothbrush, and your girlfriend is our girlfriend now. They understand that I'm not their mother anymore.
You send them into rehab? Is that what you do?
I do, yeah. I make sure they have a place, they got a bed, so I can't do an intervention without knowing that moment I get them to go, they're in somewhere in a bed, safe, in detox, getting better.
Oh, so that's what you do. You get involved and get them directly to detox or into a rehab.
Yes, I've done 4 interventions in one day, and all 4 successful. I said,
Wow.
there's nobody in the whole world who could say that. And while I was doing interventions, I had him in the back seat. I said, this is Tommy, this is Louie, this is Tom. I'll be right back. I got to go get Cindy. I'll be up there doing intervention. Come down. All right, Cindy, this is Tommy, this is Larry, Harry. We flew on a plane, and I flew in with 4 people into the rehab, and they were like, how did you do that? But I was also walking into a house, and the wife was running out screaming, he's got a gun. And I'm walking in the house going, all right, God, you brought me here. I would say there's a reason why you brought me here. I'm going in. And he went to rehab too.
Well, this is your calling in life, Joe. It's obvious even after that accident and everything that you've been through that God had a different plan and a purpose for your life. And obviously you found what that is.
Like I've also been, I wanted to do a TV show. I was on Parco PI, which was a private detective in New York. I became a private eye in later in life. I wore a different hat. And I was on Parco PI on Court TV. I loved it. But then more people were calling me to do interventions. And I told God, I go, God, I promised God. Listen, I promised him that I would help anybody who reached their hand out to me. And every time somebody reaches their hand out to me, I go, God's on it. God's on it. I know I promised you. And then I go, remember that TV show we were talking about? Can I at least look into that?
He didn't answer you though, huh?
I do this for God. That's it. God found this job for me, and he gave me the tools to do it.
To come through what you came through, Joe, and to be doing what you're doing now it's your legacy, without a doubt. It's your legacy. And fortunately, you've been able to, get the tough part behind you, and you got a great attitude and a great approach to life. It's wonderful to really sit down with you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. I feel the same way about you. That we finally got to talk. I'm going to tell you this because I want you to know a lot of great things were gifted to me in my life, and I actually own the largest collection of Michael Jackson artwork in the world.
Really? Wow, that's big.
Unbelievable how it came to me, but I was buying it from this woman who was a Michael Jackson fan club, and she worked for Sony. And she got some drawings, and she showed them to me, and I said, I have to have those. And I bought them, and I have a big, huge collection of Michael Jackson artwork. And I wanted to really use it to help people get into rehab. Like somebody wants to fly, who can't fly to rehab. I pay for the flight. They don't have sneakers or sweats or nothing to get in. I buy them clothes and sneakers. And I wanted to use them to do that. So one day I have to sell them to make it part of Michael's legacy, that he brought those to me so I could do that for them. I worked for the water department when I was younger, and Michael was coming to New York. This was in the 80s. Michael's coming to New York. I'm working for the water department. I tell my boss, I say, listen, I got to leave early. I got to get Michael Jackson tickets. I'm going to see him. No matter what, I have to see Michael Jackson. He goes, you ain't leaving early. He said, I got a lot of work for you. He brought all his paperwork out. I go, you know what? Get my resignation papers. Mm-hmm. I resigned from the job to go get Michael Jackson tickets that were sold out a minute after they opened up.
Yeah, that's right.
Tickets. And I resigned from the job. The guy told me, he said, I could get a limb. I'll find a guy with no legs would love this job. I said, go find yourself a limbless man and get me my resignation papers.
I wish if I'd have known you back then, I could have got you Michael Jackson tickets, but it's all right. Yeah.
Listen, everything's all supposed to happen when it happened.
That's right.
I'm glad I know you now, Mike.
Same here, Joseph, really. And I really feel for you. And I commend you for just the way come through those struggles and challenges and what you're doing with your life now. It's really commendable, really.
Thank you. You too. You're changing lives. You're changing lives. You're giving the message out.
That's what we got to do, right? If God, graces us with mercy and gives us, for me, listen, for me, it could have went very bad. And I thank God every day for having my freedom and for having my life. And so you got to give back. Got to give back.
That's what it's all about. Listen, making amends for the things of the past.
Exactly. All right, so there you have it. And people, I hope you take what I believe is really important about this sit down out of it, what Joseph had to say. Just think of this. Here's a guy, a young man, I would say, 10 years old, that loses his father. His father was murdered. That was his hero. That was his idol. It was dad. It was close to him. And the first funeral he ever attends at 10 years old was his father. Imagine how he had to grow up knowing that, the effect that it had on him, the emotional effect, the resentment that he had, the anger that he had early on. And yet, as you heard, here's a man that forgave the people that murdered his father. And did you hear what he said? He's a Christian now, and I have to highlight this because so many people, knock Christians. Oh, you went to prison and you found God, and they're not Christians, and they judge real Christianity by the actions of some people who pretend to be Christians but really are not living a Christian life. But think about it. He forgave John Gotti to the extent where he wanted to go to prison and meet with John when he knew that John was dying. He wanted to meet with him beforehand and give John a chance to, just speak and get things off of his chest, because as a Christian, it's very burdensome to carry around things. It's very burdensome to carry around anger and resentment at people. It's so much easier to forgive and take this weight off of your shoulders. That's what real Christians do. We believe and know that Jesus died on the cross to forgive us a horrible death. So forgiveness is a wonderful thing. And the fact that Joseph was able to forgive the person that was responsible for the murder of his dad is an example that all of us should follow. Really, all of us. And if you look at YouTube and you look at social media, how much anger is there? How much animosity? How much, vulgar language is on there? And people knocking people and people just, the hard part of things. I was at UCLA and the chief of police there is a friend of mine. He told me there's a suicide a month from these young kids, okay? College kids. Many of them because of things that they're reading on social media about themselves, the peer pressure that they get. He actually said this to me because there's so much bad stuff that's coming on social media. It's terrible. And as Christians, we don't want to see that. We don't want to believe that. I've said this, publicly, and I'll say it again. Social media has done me well. It's been good for my brand. But if they could close it down, I would say good, do it. Because it's become something that there's so much anger, there's so much resentment, there's so much bad stuff coming out of it. And we wish that would be cleaned up in some way. How do you do that? By forgiving people, by getting some kind of joy in your life, even through tough times. Here's a young man, a boy at 10 years old that was able to overcome all of that. And look what he's doing now. Interventions, helping young people, okay? And older people too, that are hooked on opioids and hooked on fentanyl. All right, he's helping them getting out of there. He's intervening that, putting them in rehabs to save their lives. Here's a guy that lost a life that was very dear to him at 10 years old, and he's now out there wanting to save lives. Very commendable. And as a Christian, I can relate to that. So people, I hope that's what you got out of this interview. All the Gotti stuff, look, you can see that anywhere. It's all over the news. It's history. It's whatever. Not important. What is important is how this young boy was able to get through a struggle, a challenge, turn it around because of his faith, and now help people and save lives. It's big. And people, I can't tell you, forgiveness, what a burden it is, released off of your shoulders when you can forgive somebody that's hurt you. It's not easy. It's tough. I did the Son of Sam interview, and I know a lot of people, were happy about it, and said great things about it. And a lot of people, well, Michael, how can you sit with that guy? Hey, I'm a Christian. You know, we're all about forgiveness. And I said, I don't know. I mean, if something, God forbid, happened to my family, I might find it tough. But hopefully I would find it within me to have forgiveness also, just like Joseph did. So I hope you got something out of this, people. You know, this is not only about mob stories, it's hopefully about something that can impact you in the right way in your life. Just to show you how sincere Joseph is, 855-JOE-BRATT, B-R-A-T-T. That's his number. If you need an intervention, if you know somebody that does, we're going to put a link here also to his email address and to the phone number, 855-JOE-BRATT, B-R-A-T-T. Contact him. He wants to help you. He's for real, this guy. And I encourage you, if you need help, if you have somebody that needs help, somebody in your family, he's been doing this for over 20 years. His success rate is great. He's been called all over the country. People are calling him. So please, you know, if you need his help, he's more than willing to do it. 855-JOE-BRATT, B-R-A-T-T. That's his phone number. His email address will be listed here. Get in touch with him. He'd be more than happy to help you out. That's it for today, my friends. How do I leave you? Same way. Never going to change. Be safe. Be healthy. God bless each and every one of you. Yes, I'll see you next time.